Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of LS Swapping this Discovery. This is going to be a pretty quick one because all we're going to talk about is purchasing a wiring harness for your engine. After securing your engine, I recommend going ahead and ordering your wiring harness before buying any other parts for the engine, because your wiring harness is going to tell you to buy certain specific parts that are compatible with it. We have an instructions page on buying a LS wiring harness, so we're going to go over this in the video. So just conceptually, how does wiring this engine in the Disco work? The idea is we're going to run this engine standalone. That means you can in theory run this engine right here on this engine stand with the computer, wiring harness, and a fuel source, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do in the Discovery. We're going to put the engine in there and run it standalone. Then we're going to take the Rover wiring harness and remove almost everything except the ignition wires and a couple of sensors we want to share. And then we're going to make a couple of connections between the two wiring harness so they can share signals back and forth. And that's it. So what that means is we can just buy a standard off-the-shelf wiring harness for the engine. So where can you get a wiring harness? My recommendation is to get a custom, high-quality, made-to-order harness for your specific engine. You can get one of those from BP Automotive, PSI Conversion, SpearTech, one of those. That's going to be the highest quality option. If you want to be sure that it's going to fire up on the first try and that the wiring harness is going to last a long time and that it's built with quality materials, this is the way to go. You get what you pay for. And for me personally, I think it's worth it, and that's what I go with. Your second option is you can buy a cheaper wiring harness. There's some dirt cheap ones on the eBay and Amazon. I've seen them go as low as $65. Now, this might be a totally valid option. There are some people who have reportedly had success with them, right? There's a few people who said they were miswired or didn't match, the connectors didn't match, or they had issues. So, it's up to you if you think it's worth a shot. I also really can't speak to how the quality is or how long they'll last. Another thing about those is that they're not going to be specific to your engine. They might not fit your fuel injectors, for example, so they'll come with little adapters, or you'll have to buy some little adapters. But totally fair option if you want to save some cash. Third option, if you bought a used engine, you can get the wiring harness from that used engine. You'll just have to strip down some of the wires and connectors that used to go to the dashboard of the donor vehicle, right? So you'll have to maybe rework it a little. And a downside is that that wiring harness might be kind of old. Okay, let's say you're ready to purchase a wiring harness. You have to pay attention to a few parameters. You have to buy a wiring harness that is for a Gen 3, assuming that's what you have. Drive-by cable, so it'll have the red-blue connectors to the PCM. It might also say 24X, which is referring to the 24X reluctor wheel in the crankshaft of a Gen 3 truck engine. You'll have to choose transmission. This doesn't really matter what transmission your wiring harness is for, because we're not plugging into any transmission, we're using the Rover one. But if you select a T56 or a non-electric transmission for your wiring harness, then you won't have those extra wires and plugs for a GM transmission. Injectors. You're going to have to choose connectors that match the injectors that came with your engine, if it came with any, or whichever ones you're planning to buy if it's a crate engine. You'll have to choose between EV6, EV1, Multec, in the case of Gen 3. Mass airflow sensor, so choose whatever came with your engine. Usually it's the Delphi style. For alternator, I choose the 4-pin option because that's what I have and what came with my engine. If yours came with the 2-pin option, you can go with that. For the map sensor, choose whatever came with your engine or whatever you plan on buying. Usually it's Delphi. AC connector, AC compressor, you don't need that. So you can ignore that parameter. You don't need to connect an AC compressor because we're going to use the Rover AC compressor connected to the Rover wiring harness. Finally, cruise control. If it asks about cruise control, you don't need that either because the cruise control is managed on the Rover side entirely. If you're getting a custom made-to-order harness, you can make a few special requests. So if you're thinking ahead and you think you might need to pass some stricter emissions in your state, you might want to ask them to add a connector for the evap purge valve, because they usually don't include that in the wiring harness. So you have to special request it. Maybe in your state you need to have 4 oxygen sensors to match the donor vehicle. Usually the wiring harnesses will come with 2 oxygen sensors, so you have to special request for 4. Another good idea, you can maybe ask them to extend the alternator wires for you by 16 inches, because we are mounting the alternator on the passenger side. The wiring harness will not reach unless you extend the wires or buy an extension. ICT billet has one, but it's like really long. It's like 3 feet. You only need an extra 16 inches to reach. And the reason it is that way is because these engines originally have the alternator on the driver's side. So if you're wondering what injectors do I have, how do I know if it's Multec, EV6, whatever, there's a bunch of online guides. Here's a link to one. I'll put it in the description. And if you get it wrong, not the end of the world. You can buy adapters to adapt from one connector type to another. Okay, so I mentioned I recommend buying a custom one from BP Automotive or a PSI conversion or SpearTech. And you may be wondering, I don't know any of these. Which one should I go with? Great question. So my first go around when I swapped the Golden Rover, I went with a BP Automotive harness, and I thought it was fantastic. It cost me about $550. Super high quality, top quality wires, and every connector came labeled, which I thought was awesome. My only complaint about it is that it has a really long section that leads to the PCM connectors. It was about 5 feet long, so I had to coil all that extra wire next to the PCM, which is kind of cumbersome. Other than that, no complaints. But if you are planning to mount the PCM somewhere remote, like under the passenger seat, which is kind of far, honestly, maybe you want that. But otherwise, I thought it was totally unnecessary. Let me show you. So we're looking at the Gold Rover. It's got the BP Automotive harness, and you can see every connector labeled, which I thought was very nice, very user-friendly. It's a nice harness. What I did is I decided to mount the PCM in the glove box. You definitely don't have to do the same, but that's what I decided on. It's in here, and behind it there's like 5 feet of coiled wire, so it was a bit cumbersome. But it comes with a fuse box right there, and OBD2 plug, which I wired and routed over there. So perfectly good. Alternatively, if you have the original battery tray, you can mount the PCM in the slot there. For this go around, I decided to try the PSI conversion wiring harness, so I could kind of show you the difference. The PSI conversion harness cost a little more than BP Automotive. I think it was a little above $600. And here it is. First impressions, it also seems like a very high quality wiring harness. Difference is it doesn't have a label on each of the connectors, so maybe a little less user friendly. For me, I mean, I feel like I can figure out what the connectors are pretty easily because this is my second go around. But for someone who's doing this for the first time, maybe that's a little bit less user friendly. Unwrapping it now, the distance between the PCM and the first branch, the grommet here, I think it's a little bit shorter than BP Automotive, but still plenty of length. So a little more convenient there. It has the OBD2 port, PCM red blue, a ground, a fuse box as expected. This fuse box is a little bulkier than the BP Automotive one and uses bigger fuses. So that's the thing. This is probably an ignition powered wire. And it has a spool of extra wires, also unlabeled. So you basically have to look up the color of the wire to see what they mean. But the BP Automotive one, for example, will have a white wire that's labeled tachometer. So that's convenient, right? This one doesn't have that. But otherwise, very well constructed. Original Delphi connectors. This will do great. Came with some instructions. Now this is pretty important because in the instructions, it'll tell you the correct oxygen sensor that you need to use for this wiring harness. I'll give you a bunch of wiring tips, which are definitely worth reading. And it'll actually have a list of compatible parts, not just O2 sensors, but which PCM. Obviously, we know this is red blue, so we should already have that. Which map sensor, Delphi in this case, which NOx sensors, which GM parts. It has some tips about how to ground your engine properly using ground straps, etc. So, worth a read, for sure. Some things won't apply, like it'll say how to wire the AC compressor, but you're not doing that because you're keeping the Rover one. It'll tell you things about cruise control and four-wheel drive signal, flex fuel signal. All these things don't apply to you. These are optional add-ons in most cases. So I figured that why not do a quick demo of choosing and purchasing a wiring harness. So bp-automotive.com. Let's check them out first. We want LS Swap harness, Gen 3 24X standalone harness kits and PCMs. Yeah. Gen 3 drive-by-cable 24X harnesses. That's what we want. Boom. Choosing your injectors. So EV6 injectors, EV1, and Multec. So it even has a little diagram to show you how to recognize your injectors. So let's say we have Multec, for example. Now, choose your transmission. 4L60E, 4L80E, or T56 non-electric. We're going to go with T56 non-electric so we don't have any of those extra connectors just dangling. Now, next it wants you to choose your mass airflow sensor. So if one of them came with your engine, likely to be this one, the 6-wire, but make sure to double check. Alternator, if the engine is from pre-2005, it probably came with a 4-pin alternator. The 2-pin ones are a little newer. I'm going to pick 4-pin. Map sensor, typically you get a Delphi one. Pick whatever applies to your engine. You can choose which type of loom do you want. Braided loom is an extra 100. Corrugated loom is included. Add cruise control? In this case, no, because the cruise control is managed on the Rover side. And that's it. That's all the options. You just add the cart and check out. Now, remember, if you want to make some special requests, I think you have to contact them first. You don't just type them in here. So contact them and ask them if you need an evap purge valve connector, they can add that for you. If you want 4 O2 sensors, they might be able to add that for you. Or if you want your alternator wires extended, they can probably do that for you. So make sure to ask in advance before ordering. PSIconversion.com. This should be very similar. So wiring harnesses, LS Vortex 24X Gen 3. That's what we want. We can filter here, manual non-electric transmission, Gen 3, that's already selected. 24X crank, drive-by cable, and computer type, we're not using a Holly, we're using the 411 red blue, the original computer. This is what we want right here. Which vehicle are you swapping? Other. Multec injectors, EV6, EV1, you choose. I think you can just pick T56. Intake manifold map sensor type Delphi or Bosch. I have Delphi. AC recognition? No. No AC compressor on the LS side. Cruise control? No. E86 flex fuel? No. We're not doing flex fuel. Braided is 125. Corrugated, 75. Or you can get a bare harness and loom it yourself, I guess. No brake switch. None of that. Add 2 O2 sensors. Maybe if you need 4 O2 sensors to pass emissions, then you might have to say yes. In my case, no. You can have them include a ground strap kit and a fuse blocks mounting bracket. So, and there you go. Now on Amazon, you can search for a DVC wiring harness And you can get, standalone wiring harness 4L60E, DVC, red blue PCM, compatible with 1997-06 GM, LS1, 5.3, etc. This could work, maybe. So this is something you could do. You could take your chance with this. Not sure about the quality, not sure how good the wiring is going to be, how tested they are. I would assume probably not tested. Reviews are somewhat mixed, but some people do have success with it. So up to you if you want to take a chance. So there you go. That is everything I know about purchasing a wiring harness for a Gen 3 truck motor. So in the next episode, we'll go over all the ancillary parts and the aftermarket parts you need to buy to dress up your engine. I'll go over where to find them, and we'll do an install and get this engine ready. All right, stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching.